Hey everyone, welcome back to Bible in a Year. Today I'm going to be focusing in on the chapters in Daniel that were in our readings today, which are Daniel chapters 10 through 12. And this is the end of the book of Daniel. So let's just jump right in. Daniel chapter 10 explains how Daniel received the prophecies in chapters 11 and 12 that we will get to. Daniel sought God for 3 weeks with no response. He fasted and prayed. It says that he fasted from choice foods, which were readily available to him, given where he was and the position he was given. So he ate no choice foods for 3 weeks, no wine, and used no lotions during this time in order to seek God. People refer to this as the Daniel fast, just like fruits and veggies. But really, it's just him humbling himself before the Lord and, giving up the choice foods and giving up those things just to come before God in humility, earnestly just seeking him. So for 3 weeks he does this and he seeks the Lord and he prays and he fasts and he feels like he's getting no response. And then he's visited by this messenger that makes everybody run away except for Daniel. Daniel is overwhelmed by this visitor, and he literally gets knocked out. He falls asleep and he goes into this dream state. And he describes this visitor, this being, as a man with these ornate priestly robes and eyes like fire, and just gives this this beautiful description that really mirrors John's vision and revelation of Jesus. So this very well could be a Christophany. This could be an instance where we see Jesus in the Old Testament. So he describes this man with eyes of fire and topaz and I think he said bronze legs or something. Listen, I read it, I swear. But you could read it in chapter 10. But it describes something very similar to John's revelation of Jesus. So this messenger gives him a vision, and he says to him, Daniel, you are esteemed in heaven, which is an incredible thing to hear from somebody who is visiting you from a heavenly realm. But Daniel was esteemed in heaven because he was humble and he fervently sought God and he prayed and he was faithful and he was contrite in spirit. He poured himself into God, into his faith, and that is why he was esteemed in heaven, which is such a great example for us to live by. He did not care of the consequences that his faith would bring him. He just lived his life for the Lord, which is amazing. So this messenger tells him, Daniel, you who are esteemed in heaven, every word that you prayed from day one was heard by God. Now the chapter starts out telling us that Daniel didn't hear squat for 3 weeks. And then this messenger says, just so you're aware, everything, every word, every prayer was heard from day one, which is so amazing because God is always working. Even when we don't see it, he's working. It's so true. The Lord is always on the move, always working things for our good, even when we're unaware of it. And this visitor explains that he got held up by the Prince of Persia. He resisted him for 21 days, which we can kind of gather is a demon on assignment over the region of Persia, which goes to show that there are so many things in the spirit realm which we do not see and we do not comprehend and we do not understand. The powers and principalities at work beyond our comprehension for good and evil, angels and demons. There's always a spiritual happening. And our prayers cause movement in this realm. There is a hierarchy. There are demons and angels on assignment over governments, over families, over us as individuals. And we don't understand how important our prayers are sometimes. And this is a lesson for me too. This is really a takeaway from me too. For 21 days, Daniel was praying and fasting. And, if it were me, I would have given up. but Daniel was a faithful man. And it just goes to show that we just need to stay diligent and fervent in our prayers, pray without ceasing, because it causes movement and shifting in the spiritual realm beyond our comprehension, beyond our understanding. I will say that, I've been walking out my faith for about a decade now. And over that decade, things that I prayed for in my early walk are just now coming to fruition. And if I had given up on those prayers, it would have been devastating. But to see the fruit of my prayers, of my labor, of my walk with the Lord, and just walking by faith and not by sight and not by circumstance, is so incredible. So this is such a so convicting for me, just to continually pray, even when I don't understand what's happening, even when I feel like God is not listening. He's always listening. He's always moving. He's always working things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. So this messenger gets held up in Persia, gets caught up in this spiritual battle, and Daniel is just overwhelmed by this vision, and he cannot handle this in his own strength, but the messenger touches him and gives him the strength to receive the rest of the vision, which is a word in itself. I feel like, sometimes things are too much for us to bear, but by the Lord's strength, we can get through it. So let's move on to Daniel 11. Daniel 11 is a prophecy detailing the history of a conflict between the king of the south and the king of the north. I did read into what these dynasties and what these regions were, but I forget what they were. So you can Google them. But the Bible tells us that the king of the south and the king of the north, following the breakup of Alexander the Great's empire, were kind of at odds with each other. And it describes these alliances and these wars over control of the land of Israel, which is geographically located in between these two kingdoms. So they are kind of at odds, trying to gain control over this land. The prophecy begins with the rise of these kingdoms and continues to describe events related to an antichrist figure and the desecration of the temple at the end of time. So this brings us over to Daniel chapter 12. So Daniel 12 summarizes the final chapter of the book of Daniel, and it focuses on the time of the end with prophecies of a final great tribulation for God's people. It describes Michael, who was the one assigned to protect Daniel's people, protecting the faithful, and predicts a resurrection and a judgment where the dead will be raised to either everlasting life or shame and contempt. The chapter also contains a prophecy that knowledge will increase, the wise will shine like stars, and that God's people will be delivered during this time of unprecedented distress. God always has a way of hiding and protecting his people. I think back to some of these other books that we've read. We've read the book of Moses, where Moses was put in a basket and hidden, and then sent down the stream and was picked up and literally raised up out of the water, and his identity was almost covered until the time that he needed to stand up for his people. Esther, her identity was hidden until she had to stand up for her people. And when the Israelites, during the plagues, their land, Goshen, was protected during all of these plagues. All of these things were happening around them, except for this one land that contained God's people. God always has a way of protecting and preserving his people and hiding them until the time that is appointed for them. So I just read all these chapters. So many of these prophecies are really like scary and heavy, and some of them really dark, but there is always a glimmer of hope when it seems like everything leads to despair for God's people, for those who love him. And that's still true for us today. We live in a really dark and scary time. We live in a time where, things are unstable financially, relationally, spiritually. Things are just sometimes out of our control, and we don't know what the next step is, or we feel like we've been praying for 3 weeks or 3 years or 3 decades, and there's been no movement from God. But I assure you that God has been hearing your prayers since day one, and He loves you. And there are angels fighting on your behalf when you pray fervently and unceasingly. God always has a plan, and He works everything out for the good of those who love Him. So stay grounded in Him. Stay planted on the firm foundation that is Jesus, because He will always protect His people. All right, guys, love you. See you tomorrow.